What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Ravens Watch. I am your host, David Lee Corbo, aka The Raven, and I'm super pumped, honestly, to bring you the guest that I have today. This is something that we've tried to set up for a while, but we're both busy and living in entirely different places on the planet, and so schedules conflict, and one thing leads to another, and it doesn't happen. But we finally made it happen, and I am here with, honestly, one of my favorite creators on X, previously Twitter. Right? Feels weird still to say X. I'm not a big fan of that. Um, but as far as a content creator who is in our realm of conspiracy, paranormal, occultism, and also in these spaces, these tremendous spaces that he holds, he's one of my favorite characters. Between the conversations and the information that he puts forward, I'm lucky enough to sit here today with Reptile Hybrid. Reptile, what's going on, brother?
G'day, Raven. How you doing, brother?
I'm good. I'm good. Before we get started, can you just let the people know where they can find your work?
For now, mate, just on X at Reptile_Hybrid. That's where you'll find me.
Right. And one of the things that I think you do really well is you hold these spaces, and these spaces go on for a tremendous amount of time. Um, but the exchange of information in them is like really impressive. Like it's such a range from any given day. If you drop in these spaces, you'll hear about all kinds of talk from, Elon Musk and SpaceX, all the way to things like reptilians. And in the conspiracy world, reptilians are kind of this. They're an essential plot point. They're an essential chunk of information when it comes to all this, and that's one of the topics that I intend to delve into today, and I think it's an appropriate guest to do that with. But before we get into any of that, um, you've modeled your your X, your Twitter, to reflect your interest in conspiracy theories. And I think an appropriate starting place would be, what is it, if you could sum up, that has gotten you into these topics in the first place? Because I always find it fascinating, everyone's origin story, right? It's like you don't end up going down the path that you've gone down, talking at for I mean, man, at this point, is it safe to say you've held hundreds of hours worth of spaces that are primarily dedicated to various conspiracy theories? You don't do that on a whim. That's not something that you just wake up one day and go, you know what? I think I'm going to start going down this route. Typically, there is a an origin story behind that. Whether it's something that caught your interest, or something personal that happened to you, or something that you just saw on the world stage that didn't vibe, um, and you didn't like the official narrative. So Reptile, for you, what is it that brought you to the game?
It's funny. I've heard you talk about it before as well. I'll give you the official story because there's much more to it. From a young age, I was probably about 20. I remember speaking to a close friend of mine, a very smart dude, and he was working with some really clever guys. And he says every one of them is just talking about UFOs and aliens, talking about the Apollo missions, about, secret government stuff. And I'll remember I went to the library and I got out two books, The Complete Guide to Alien Abductions. I think it was Jenny Randall's, and one called Cosmic Top Secret by John King, which had Phil Schneider's story in the back. And you know what it's like, Raven? You just get addicted to it. You can't describe it. It's like that with anybody. Unless you're interested in it, you're not going to learn about it. And so I think lots of people get into conspiracies in different ways. My first introduction to it was through aliens and UFOs, which is filled with deception. And people think they know it all about that. We don't know. And after that, it just become kind of like an obsession with me. I couldn't stop reading. I devoured as much information as I could. And it's still like that over 20 years later. And I know you're similar. We can't describe why we do what we do, but we're obsessed with the information.
Yeah, it's for me in particular, it's like this. I cannot express how much I value the truth, and I'm not saying that I have a stranglehold on it, or that I've come to know things beyond a shadow of a doubt. In fact, it would seem more often than not, it's like my old paradigm gets shattered. I'm presented with something totally new. Especially, that has been a consistent theme throughout my entire experience with all of this stuff. And you would think that that would slow down after one paradigm shatters. You would kind of imagine that you'd get into at least some sense of security in your ideas and go, okay, we've busted through the last four ideas that we had, thrown them in the trash. This new one has to be it. And it's like, to be honest, Reptile, in the past 2 years, um, I think it's probably happening more rapidly than it even used to, which is wild because I can't tell you how many times I've been wrong. Um, but one of the things you just mentioned there was the story of Phil Schneider, which was like monumental in my in the beginning stages of my journey, right? For those of you who don't know, Phil Schneider, and I'm going to pass the ball back to you because I know I'm going to get some of this wrong, but he was tasked with there's actually a really good documentary on voodoo right now that I intend on watching. It's like $7. I'm going to pay the $7. Apparently it's like an hour long, but it's new and it's all about Phil Schneider. So Phil Schneider, for those of you who don't know, he was somebody who was contracted by the government to build DUMBs, right? Deep underground military bases. Um, Most people are familiar with that, right? It's like the government has these secret military bases that are vast in expanse, and they're subterranean. They're under the ground. So he is and his crew. This isn't like a secret mission necessarily. They're down under the ground, plotting out, where they're going to put this and that and the other thing when it comes to building these bases. Through some series of events, he ends up in a cavern underground where, to his description, there is essentially a war going on. And this war is between green and black berets, I think he said. I'm not too familiar with like the military terminology, but and um and some sort of reptilians. I believe it's like subterranean reptilians.
He said Grays,
And
but yeah.
Grays was that. There you go. So they one thing leads to another, and these Grays uh emit some sort of a beam or an energy blast that essentially guts Phil Schneider. He's hit with this beam, abdominal scar to prove it, missing several digits on one of his hands. And the idea is that he survives it, but not without his intestines essentially hanging out of his body. And if it wasn't for the heroic efforts of a Green Beret soldier who was able to drag him to an elevator shaft, put him into it, and send it up, he would not have survived. And to his descriptive, the gentleman who saved his life didn't survive either. Uh, and so there's a lot of space in between this that I'm unsure of. But one day it leads to Phil Schneider. There's a classic video, grainy, looks like early 2000s, maybe late 90s footage of Phil talking at a podium in front of a group of people, saying that there was essentially a war happening beneath the surface between our own military or the world's militaries and these entities. And he says that there is a threat on his life. And I believe he's actually, by this point, had several brush ins with attempts on his life, driving him off the road, gunshots, I think, something of that nature. And long story short, to wrap it up, Phil ends up, dying of a suicide, allegedly. And if I'm not mistaken, because of Phil's injuries, he's on a catheter and he's actually strangled himself, allegedly, right? Air quotes for himself, with the hose of the catheter. And it's tied incredibly tight. And it's just one of these things that rings true to like the, people that are close to the Clintons that get suicided. A guy's tied to a tree and somehow takes two shotgun blasts to the chest or something like that. And this is, a suicide. Is that an effective wrap up of the Phil Schneider story?
Brilliant, Raven, spot on. And just before people could dismiss somebody like Phil Schneider, his dad, Otto Oscar von Schneider, was a brilliant, brilliant man. He could make a watch, a weapon just from a lathe, a master machinist. Apparently, the Nazis had $1 million worth of gold bullion on his head, and that's his son. And that's another thing too, Raven. How many smart people, how many whistleblowers came out and spoke about some of these New World Order issues that we talk about these. They're incessantly just building these underground bases, doing all of this stuff to create what they call the New World Order, the full takeover of humanity. They've spoken about it. We all know the Bilderbergs, Council on Foreign Relations. We all know the names. So before somebody dismisses a guy like Phil Schneider, this guy's a geologist, an expert in his game. And it happened to me, Raven. I know you've mentioned it as well. The deeper down the rabbit hole you go, eventually, I didn't want to believe in all the reptilian stuff, but eventually you've got to leave your belief system at the door. Because I don't care how smart you think you are. You've only been on this world for what? 30, 40, 50, 70 years? You don't know anything. We don't know what's happening on this planet. We don't even know where we live. So you think reptilians is crazy? And you go back throughout history, Raven. I got obsessed with it. You go back throughout history. Every single damn culture has worshipped the snake. Mesopotamia, the Gnostics, Judaism, Africa. Here in Australia, with the Aboriginal culture, it's a massive theme. Sobek in Egypt, Asia, the Americas, India, everywhere. Going throughout history, I can find the reptilian theme throughout history everywhere I go. Why is that? And should we start taking them more seriously when they tell you about the Anunnaki, who means, those from heaven to earth came, how these cultures just sprung out of nowhere and had this advanced technology? The Baalbek, Lebanon, what were they? 1,600-ton stones. Forget aliens. How the hell did they do that? It was either a lost technology that we don't know about, or if we go back and actually read the writings of these ancient people, we were visited by the gods. And there's a huge conspiracy with that at the moment too, Raven. The waters have never been more convoluted, whether it's flat earth, globe earth, hollow earth. They're not aliens, they're demons, they're this, they're that. I think ultimately we're talking about the same thing, and we're getting lost in the details. The devil's in the details. Something is there, something's controlling this planet, and it goes way beyond a human control factor. What is it? And you look all throughout time about the names for these beings. The Shitahuri, the Zulu called them that. The serpent gods, the snake brothers, star people, flyers, demons, archons, jinns. We're calling them reptilians. The one and only Aleister Crowley said, we're calling them demons now, but in the future you'll call them something else. So I say reptilians, aliens, just read demons, jinn, whatever you want to read into. We're talking about the same thing.
Yeah, that's an incredibly potent point. One of the things I learned early on was that you can, like you just said, find examples of snake worship, serpent worship, even reptilian worship across so many different cultures that had no means of connecting with one another, separate by oceans, separate by, hundreds, thousands of years in some cases, but with the same depictions on their ancient monolithic sites, in their sort of hieroglyphs, even in the Bible, to kind of touch on what it is you're describing in the sense of just this different word that's attributed to these entities. You have this race of angels called the seraphim, and the seraphim were said to be sort of a serpentine reptilian class of angels, and they were gifted with the ability of shapeshifting. So there's this and people will I guess anthropologists will explain this away in sort of a metaphoric way, right? Where it's like the reason you have this concept of shape-shifting reptilian gods is because the snake and the lizard, they shed their skin. And so in the way that the serpent can shed its skin and start anew, this metaphor has entangled itself in countless cultures' mythology. Whenever it talks about, let's say, maybe the seasons, for example, right? It's like fall, everything dies and falls off, and then come spring, everything is made anew. And so experts in the field, who I think have a status quo to protect, when you go to some prestigious college, for example, and you pay gratuitous amounts of money to get your degree, and you finally make it past the gatekeepers, you have so much vested in this that you too yourself become a gatekeeper and can't see these things through any other lens. Although we are being inundated with all sorts of people within the field, I think there's a real argument for David Icke being one of the people to lead the way. And so the dam is getting its cracks and fissions. But predominantly, this is explained away as a colorful metaphor for renewal, for rebirth, and typically on a nature level. But I think that it's certainly my contention that these things are much more real. And we have these examples, right? It's like we mentioned flat Earth before. There are certain conspiracy theories that are like the plague. You don't want to touch them. Flat Earth being one of them. And it's like they are synonymous with a high level of ridicule. So, so where you're totally crazy for thinking about flat Earth, you're also totally crazy for thinking about reptilians. It's a really effective mechanism to not even like, as soon as you, it's the trope of oh, you think that aliens are real? You believe in little green men? And we're far beyond that. We've left that in the dust with the UFO disclosure that's been going on lately, and sort of the cultural breakthrough in the conversation, thanks to people like Joe Rogan and the whole Bob Lazar episode. We can now talk about these things openly. So we've gotten past that, but like reptilians are still one of those things. Flat Earth is still one of those things, and but it's striking me lately that some of the most ridiculed aspects of the conspiracy realm might actually be the truest. And I've gotten to the point now where, it's like we had the that motherfucker's not real lady, right? She's on the plane. For some reason, everybody immediately attributed what she was pointing at to being like a shape-shifting reptilian, which is really weird because there was no evidence to support that, but that's certainly the narrative that got espoused on X or Twitter. Um, the idea of the seraphim certainly being a thing, but also this, I mean, right now it's in the realm of rubber masks, right? Everybody is seeing our elite ruling class with these really advanced rubber masks. Before that, Reptile, I don't know if you remember this, I'm sure you do. The early 2000s were inundated with glitchy videos of news broadcasters blinking with two sets of eyelids, or um a slitted eye, much like your profile picture, or some sort of distortion of the mouth. You would see like sharpened teeth. This was happening like constantly, and this was like the beginning stages of the real public aspect of the rollout of the concept of reptilians. Do you remember all that stuff? The glitchy videos?
You were right there with me. We were watching this stuff nonstop on YouTube. See, the reptilians, they're changing. And that's the problem with it, especially in the new digital age with all the effects that they can do. There's so much misinformation and people swallow anything. The crazier it is, Eskimo was talking about it on your show not too long ago. The crazier it is, people like to believe it. Now, having said that, did you ever see Bush Sr. there on Larry King with Bill Clinton, with the fire behind him as his eyes change and you see a vertical pupil?
Yeah.
And even that stuff with the distortion, when you really get into it, can digital video pick this up? We just don't know. There's so many anomalous videos out there where we really don't know. Some of these media types, leaders, I don't know, man, but I was there watching it along with you. Don't worry about that. Hey, just really quickly, let's get into it too. We talk about, is it really that far-fetched? And if it's all right, I'd like to get into the galactic history of it. Now, again, don't believe me. I'm going to say this before to everybody. Do not believe what I'm about to tell you. Because believe me, I'm here to manipulate people's minds. That's what I do. Let's go to the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. Apparently, these tablets were found under some Mayan temple in Mexico. And they talk about the existence of this reptilian race. They call them the Children of Shadows. And we can find this all around the world. This guy, Maurice Doriel, first translated it in 1925. It wasn't until way later that we actually were able to read it. This is exactly what it says, going way, way, way back. Again, here we go. In the form of man move they amongst us, but only to sight were they as men. Serpent-headed when the glamour was lifted, but appearing to man as men among men, crept they into the councils, taking form that were likened to men, slaying by their arts the chief of the kingdoms, taking their form and ruling over man. Only by magic could they be discovered, only by sound could their faces be seen. Sought they from the kingdom of shadows to destroy man and rule in his place. Yet beware, the serpent still liveth in a place that is open, at times to the world unseen. They walk among thee in places where the rites have been said. Again, as time passed onward, shall they take the semblance of man. And you look at anything, even if it's an intelligence agency, if you want to infiltrate any society, you have to have something that looks like the inhabitants of the place that you want to take over. So it's not that far-fetched. And the story of the creation of the hybrids, how it all works, because I see lots of people now getting right into it, saying that that they're not physical beings. And I'm sure that these entities, again, live in places outside of the frequency that we live in, the lower astral realm, whatever you want to call it. The shape-shifting reptilians, the hybrids. I'm talking about genetic technology, about how they created these shapeshifters, what it's all about. This is a physical shapeshifting 3D phenomenon. It's absolutely mind-boggling. That's why all the presidents are related. That's why royal families have to interbreed with each other. You have to keep the compatible lineage. Otherwise, it doesn't work. That's the full 50-50 shapeshifters. And it's also the reason for the rituals, the blood drinking. It's very deep, man. It's
Man,
very, very deep.
I've never heard. I've heard of the emerald tablets. I've never, only peripherally, never delved into them myself. Never heard any readings from them. Really interesting where they say the only way to reveal the face is through sound. And to me, that sounds like frequency, right? So is my mind goes to this place where it's like, were they saying the way to drop the camouflage that they're using is through a frequency technology?
Yeah.
Imagine that.
They even talk
Imagine
about. They
blasting
even
them
talk
and all
about.
of a sudden
Hey,
it fucking
they even talk about a word. It's apparently called kininigan. You gotta love it. Can you say it just to prove you're not a reptilian, Raven?
what
Kininigan.
is it? Kininic
Kininigan.
Kininikin? I don't know, dude. I
Kininigan.
don't know if I can Kininigan. All right,
There
Kininigan,
you go. You're not a
Kininigan.
reptilian. That's provable. Okay. Hey, do you remember the movie again? Look at some of these movies that told us about this. They Live, the series, the movie Avatar, where they metaphorically put on the glasses and are able to see these beings. And we can get right into what's really going on in the times that we live, because even David Icke has spoken about that the reptilians are consuming more and more blood, and eventually people will be able to see them. Will there eventually be a technology or something through frequency or sound where we can actually see who's who? And that's an interesting thought too.
Imagine how bad that would fuck people up if something happened. Like, what happens if this whole time 5G has actually been to our benefit, and all of a sudden they kick it on, like 6G comes. They kick on 6G, and all of a sudden half the neighborhood is walking around as reptilian people. So you're in like the supermarket or the mall, trying on clothes, and all of a sudden the lady who gave you the number to go inside the changing booth, when you come back out, she's a reptilian. She doesn't know that the thing is sounded off, and so she's still doing her job, but she's got full reptile head, dude. That would
Hey,
be something pretty impressive.
Hey, do you remember the end of the movie They Live? They have to find where this frequency is being broadcasted from, and it's apparently from one of the media towers. And they destroy the tower, and then everybody can see them for who they are.
Wow.
And again, you look at all this stuff that's happening. I don't care if you really want to wrap up the big conspiracy. Forget the reptilians. Everything they're doing, from the 5G to the food to spraying the air, all this sort of stuff, I believe, is designed to stop us from truly waking up. It's a 24/7 job for these assholes, and their time is short as well. There's something very special going on. You know what it was like 20 years ago? Nobody would have even been speaking about this. And now I go on X and I see all these different people with different thoughts and beliefs. Nobody's, you don't have to agree with me or Raven. You come up with your own ideas. The truth is, I'm not even going to use the word truth. People are waking up to what's really going on, and their time is short. The devil knows his time is short. And mark my words, you're about to see things that you couldn't possibly imagine very, very shortly.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we're on this uh I forget what the Bible calls it, if it's like the quickening or the short time or something like that, and I could be attributing the wrong phrase to the wrong concept, but in my mind there's this rapid increasing of information. We're sort of like blowing through barriers that would otherwise prevent us from having these conversations, like you're saying. They're long gone in the past now. You know, just the other day, Elon Musk, before he was able to pull it off Twitter, which of course he knows that it's already been screenshotted and things of that nature, he's making jokes about Pizzagate being true. And so, man, rewind 3 years ago, and even a mention of that would have had you ostracized from any like reasonable community, and had you, what's the expression, persona non grata. You know, you would not have been able to espouse this kind of rhetoric. And I was just talking on my podcast, Nephilim Death Squad, with my co-host Top and our guest Cheney in Wonderland, and what I was saying is uh, Elon just kicked open the floodgates, and you're going to see this rhetoric increase very rapidly. And so we are very much in this space where it almost gives me anxiety. I don't know how long it's going to last. You know what I mean? Like I look at Elon Musk and I go, in my opinion, he's an actor, a sort of a world stage puppet character who's got a job to do to progress this story along. And as much as he seems like a friend of the people, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think he just has a role to play. And so that makes me a little bit uneasy when it comes to how long is this really, this wonderful grace period that we're experiencing right now, where we're allowed to say these things. Not only that, but to also gain some popularity. You know, it's really groundbreaking for me to be able to show people information. Like I said earlier at the jump of the show, I don't know what the truth is. And like you were just saying, right? And I'm not telling you what the truth is. I'm just showing people compelling information that I find interesting, I find alarming. And I'm connecting dots and I'm going, hey, I'm not saying this is definitively what's happening here. But can you see how this connect the dot picture actually starts to flesh out and look really compelling? And man, it feels good, but it doesn't feel like it can last forever.
And you look at it even more. Look at all the disclosure now. We have to ask why. You're going to trust the same people that lied to us for what? Decade after decade after decade now. Oh, they're telling us the truth. Elon's here to save us. And that even includes the reptilian information. For whatever reason, so much information is coming out. But now you better be so careful listening to me, to Raven, to anybody, because the deception is just so damn deep. It's crazy. And ultimately, Raven, it's a spiritual thing. And I know you know what I'm talking about. Once you've really gone down the rabbit hole, you spoke about it before. Socrates says, wisdom's knowing how little you know. It does it affect your life? I heard you talking about you overcoming adversity. You know, at the end of the day, it might not do you any good. And if your friends and family don't want to hear about it, don't talk to them about it. But I'm telling everybody right now, this disclosure, it's deeper and it's more in depth than you can ever imagine. Even the reptilians, Raven, eventually want themselves known. And that's actually what I'm about as well. They're ready to be known. Who knows what could happen in the future? Could you imagine a disclosure event revealing the truth, not the truth, but revealing that we're not alone and actually being able to see these beings, even if it's a Spielberg puppet? That will change the world, and it's coming.
Yeah, I do. I think about that often. People have this kind of this rhetoric right now of, isn't it strange that we're on the cusp of disclosure and nobody is reactive? And I can agree with that to a degree. And it's hard to say why people aren't reactive. There's this trope, right, of like, well, people aren't reactive because they all have lives and we all have full-time jobs that we have to get back to. And some of us have wives and children and car notes and mortgages and all this stuff that's really keeping us from looking up at this thing that's happening. But I don't necessarily believe that that's the reason. I think what's more probable is that we've been inundated to such a large degree by the Hollywood machine that um, the disclosure is following kind of a predictable playbook. It's just telling us things that Hollywood's already told us, you know, in more official and less flashy terms. So it's not even entertaining on top of all these things. But for those of us who are in the um, truth or community. These expressions are so dry and kind of shitty. The truth or community. Well, for those of us who are conspiracy theorists, um, when it comes to the topic of UFOs and aliens, we're really not even that far removed from the things that the normies, another expression that's gross, the normies, they don't believe, but they know. And that's because the information that the normies get, they get it from the movies in Hollywood. And when disclosure comes, it's literally just giving you pieces of things that you've already seen in film. So we almost all know the same kind of shit. So when we see this happening with David Grush and, appearances on popular podcasts and the Tic Tac UFO and all these different things that are happening, it's kind of like, yeah, we all of us, you don't even have to be a conspiracy theorist to already kind of know what the hell this is all about. And so I think that's much more where the problem lies. But I want to ask you after this your opinion on something. Um, but and it's just your opinion, right? We're not here telling people that we know definitively what the truth is. Um, but I do worry that the best lie is one that maintains as close to parallel with the truth as possible. So it's like if there's 10 points to make, 9 truths and one very important lie is still a very destructive lie. And so my fear is the inundation by Hollywood and the media at large, um, with the origins of these things, right? So like basically it's a galaxy far, far away. And they've got super advanced technology. They can traverse the stars. And to some degree, there's this notion that they have a vested interest in our mutually assured destruction, whether it's nuclear war, um, climate disasters of our own making, we're destroying the planet, and these otherwise benign interveners want to stop us from destroying ourselves, which is like a really a really flowery and hopeful kind of descriptive. And I can't help but think, wouldn't it be something if it truly was much more nefarious than that? I'm of the contention that a lot of these things, I'm sure not all of them, but a lot of them are, excuse me, are like ancient adversaries. These things that enslaved us, whether you're looking at it from the biblical point of view, which is funny, right? Because going all the way back to the garden, we've been struggling with serpents and reptiles since the dawn of mankind. It's never left us. It's an integral mechanism to the human experience, is this struggling. And people like Jordan Peterson would explain this away as a psychological human mechanism that's told through allegory. It's meant to teach lessons and it's meant to be metaphorical, but it is still deep and meaningful. And I was of that school of thought for a little bit. And then I got back into the like, no, this is much more literal. And so if you're telling us that these things are benign interveners from another galaxy with high tech technology, but they're actually something that is capable of, let's just say at the bare minimum, capable of deceit on a level that is like far beyond us. Well, that's 9 very important truths, but one very damning lie. I'd be interested in like your opinion. What do you speculate that these things actually are in the realm of like, let's suspend the disbelief. They are real, right? There are reptilian shapeshifters. There are insectoid aliens. There are grays, tall and skinny, short, all the variety. What do you think that these things are in nature?
Do you know what I reckon? Could you imagine in the expanse of everything how many different, let's just say, intelligent life forms could be out there? And again, for these humans to think that they know, I'm sure so many of them are, quote, interdimensional. Some of them might be like, in the astral realm and non physical entities. Yes, definitely. But to discount that physical entities might be here, living inside of our planet, interacting with our Earth, there's that as well. And I think it's a huge part of who we are as Homo sapiens sapiens, which is very, very important. We don't even know who we are, Raven. We came on the scene out of seemingly nowhere. There's a huge missing link. And when you go back to the ancient texts, it tells you about the creation of man. You're right. The serpent, the reptilian, who was more cunning than any beast of the field, who spoke a language and walked upright. And you go back to the Bible, especially Genesis. So much truth can be found in those books. But I believe it's all of the above, and I'm with you, mate. The deception is just absolutely next level. Again, that's why I keep saying, don't believe me, don't believe Raven, but I believe it's all of the above, including what's really happening on our Earth. Phil Schneider said when they stumbled upon the Greys, he said they eventually figured out they were there for thousands and thousands of years. So I believe it's all of the above.
What a wild idea, right? Is this beneath our feet in this cat? That's why it's funny to me when people go, is the earth flat or is it a sphere? And I go like I could kind of go either way. These days, I'm watching a lot of
Just
like
really
these flat
quickly for
earthers.
me too. Just really quickly for me, it's hollow. Okay, there's entrances in the North and South Pole. North 1,350 miles apparently, in the bottom 900 miles. The real action's taking place inside of our planet. All of the other stuff's a distraction. Those
That
ancient
is
places, Shambhala, Agartha. Think about that. That could be actually what all these UFOs and stuff, where they're really going. I'm talking central sun, insane. Could you imagine that? We're just the surface dwellers, treated like mushrooms, kept in the dark and fed BS. Sorry, mate.
yeah. No, no, that is a perfect interjection because that's exactly where I was going with this is like flat or sphere is much less compelling to me than hollow. Massive expanses of cavernous, empty space within our own planet, where, you know, it only makes sense if we are dealing with things like, let's say, periodic coronal mass ejection or the impending doom of a meteor strike, right? If that were to be announced right now, I mean, like, just think about it from a logistics point of view. If that were to be announced right now that it is in fact happening, and by the end of the month, we're going to get smacked with a coronal mass ejection that everything on the surface is going to be basically fried. Even at the bare minimum, let's say it didn't fry you, it killed the power grid, and it has a really high risk of giving you cancer, like deadly, fast acting, fast developing cancer. Or even worse, an impending impact from a meteor. Our very first reaction would be go underground. And so the idea that uh, previous civilizations wouldn't have done the same, I think that, if you go to New York City, right, this is where the Tartaria thing comes into play, where everything supposedly got uh, buried by a mud flood. And all the remnants of this ancient civilization were hidden beneath, I don't know, in some cases it's like 20, 30 feet of mud. Um, then there is definitively, just by that, structures underground. And if you go to New York City, there is like sections where they just built cities on top of other cities. So you can go through the subways and you can find just abandoned cities and storefronts beneath the streets of New York City. And I think that it probably goes well beyond that, right? You have the catacombs in Paris where they go on for miles and miles, tunnels just filled with bones. This is not, there's even tunnels, I think, under Peru that they've just discovered using ground penetrating LIDAR technology, where they can see that. I don't know the lore behind it. I forget. I listened to it recently, but it's like there was rumored to be these massive expanses of tunnels beneath these megalithic structures, and they just got turned into mythology. And so everybody who was associated with, the natives there just would pass it down as mythology, like it never existed, but it was a story. Now they're finding out that it did exist. I think that there is so much beneath our feet. And when you said this idea of a subterranean sun, I believe is what you said. I know that I have been seeing these images recently of sort of a I don't know if it comes from Freemasonry, but the idea of the black sun and that somehow it's projecting two images, holographic images, those images being our sun and our moon. But these things are coming out pretty rapidly now. You used to have to search for them, right? You'd have to sit down and watch like Zeitgeist, or you'd have to try to decode iPet Goat 2 to try to figure out like any of this shit. This is now like rampant. These ideas are all over the place. And I think it just feels like to me we're on the cusp of finding out a lot of the things that ancient people believe. Isn't that so stupid of us, right? Finding out that a lot of the things that ancient peoples believed was actually 100% true, and that the hubris of modern day society, and thinking that we have a relationship with science because the scientific community tells us, it disseminates information to us. We have no way of fact checking it. We take it as gospel, and then we say the ancients were retarded. And it's like every day we get a little bit closer to finding out, like, I'm of the school of thought that the Greek pantheon and the gods that the Mayans and the Aztecs and the Inca worshipped and sacrificed people to. These were all real entities, in my opinion. They're the same things that would have been called the fallen in Christianity, and they're the same thing that would have also been their offspring, the Nephilim. On my other show, Nephilim Death Squad, we call all of this stuff Nephilim shit because the idea is like, even if the translations are wrong, right? Even if Christianity calls it one thing, but the Sumerians call it another thing, and the Egyptians called it another thing, Nephilim shit is almost a placeholder for like the ancients were right, and we're dealing with something much older and much more complex than our 2023 modern scientific minds can grasp.
Totally agree. That's what I started to do. I went back. You go look at these ancient cultures and they've got all this advanced technology. And then when you really get to the bottom of it and they say, how did you get this? They say the gods brought this stuff down. But for some reason, we just discount that. They're telling us. And I also believe too, Raven, we live in a time now where we can go back and look at these scriptures, including who were the angels, these demons that they talk about. Now, maybe for the first time, we can actually get a really, really good grasp on actually what's going on. And that includes the reptilian story as well. We really, for the first time, can be able to understand what might actually be taking place. Because dudes like David Icke and others, they've been all around the world and spoken to these people who have seen this stuff firsthand. And Icke talks about it. He went from country to country, one after the other, and they were talking about the same thing. Fritz Springmeier says it as well, and I might read some stuff if it's all right later on. And
Absolutely.
eventually, David Icke said, "Man, I might have to start, taking this more seriously." He's spoken to, satanic ritual abuse victims, psychologists contacting him saying you'd be amazed how many little kids are drawing these figures with cloaks with reptilian eyes and talking about this same stuff. There comes a point where we've got to actually take it seriously. If hundreds of people are telling you that they're, going to these rituals and seeing people transform into reptilians, then there comes a point then you've got to actually take them at their word and actually explore it. And David Icke, God bless him, was the first person to put it in print. Because guys before him, like Fritz Springmeier, who wrote some incredible stuff. Do I believe everything both of those dudes say? No. And I understand people's criticism of them. Now we have a chance to actually understand it. And never forget, Aleister Crowley, you call them demons, in the future they'll call them something different. We're living in Crowley's reality, Raven. That's what's happening.
My concern with these people, like with David Icke, huge fan of David Icke, have been since I was a kid. He was one of the early people that I discovered, him and Alex Jones, right? These are the two. You have the angel and the devil on your shoulder. I had like David Icke and Alex Jones on my shoulder at like 16 years old. I'm smoking an incredible amount of pot, and I'm just listening to these two dudes just destroy everything that I thought I knew. And now where I've come is like David Icke is still to this day like one of the most incredible people when it comes to pushing this information into the mainstream. But I got to the point where I'm like, he speaks about channeling um the spirits of the Atlanteans. I don't know if he says ascended masters, but I do believe that in one of his own books he wrote that he was communing with the spirits of the Atlanteans, that there was something, he felt a presence um consistently over time, and then one day asked the presence to like make itself be known, started communing with this thing. The only issue that I have is that um and it really doesn't stretch beyond this, is like these things, they can lie. And that's really it. So like everything that Ike says is terribly interesting. There's so much to back it. And I do think that even if there is something communing with him and lying to him, uh that it's like the same thing with Crowley, right? Crowley was in commune with a lot of different entities. And I'm very sure that a lot of the information that he got was uh, true. But I think that these things, they all have an agenda. And it's actually, so the agenda, in my opinion, is to get us, you alluded to it before, right? These these ancient beings, they come down and they give people technology. And if you look at these ancient cultures, they will attribute even the simplest of things, for example, agriculture, to being disseminated to them by some deity that they worship. And on my other show, I was speculating with my co-host Top that it seems like there's always been this effort to get us technologically advanced. So these entities, right? Because even when it comes to our really big leaps in technology, we're talking like the 40s, 50s, 60s, um, that was supposedly from reverse engineered crashed crafts, the Roswell incident, things of that nature. And our ability to reverse engineer their stuff, maybe not to a full extent, but still to whatever degree that we could, was speeding up the technology that was available to the average person, and certainly the technology that the elites were using. They're always, 30 years ahead of us, something of that nature, is the idea. And so we started to speculate as to, like, is there a force that is pushing us down a path so that we can become technologically advanced enough, and it's something that's capable of playing a really long game, and to the point where we can maybe do a number of things, alter ourselves, um, as we stand on the cusp of a real viable path to transhumanism right now, with things like Neuralink and things like that, CRISPR, gene editing technologies, um, but also this concept of portals, right? Uh, Ouija boards are like a rudimentary version. When you're always in, hit with this idea of stargates, that the ancient people had technology like stargates that would act as portals, passing entities through, or that we would go through and cross vast expanses in just a moment. But now we have CERN and the Large Hadron Collider, right? That it's in, I think, Geneva, Sweden, Switzerland. And the idea is that they're looking for these particles that they can expose by recreating the moment of the Big Bang. So they smash these particles together, uh, and they take high speed photographs, and they speculate on the idea of theoretical particles. And we may be able to see them if we can recreate the moment of the Big Bang on a small scale, take a bunch of photographs. They might be in there for a brief moment in time. That would confirm a bunch of things about dark matter. Shit that's way beyond my pay grade. I really don't understand. But the joke that even CERN has made is like, but we also might open like a small black hole or some shit like that. And there's a lot of speculation right now in the paranormal community that these large hadron colliders, or small ones too. There's also small ones, smaller ones in Oak Ridge in America, a couple other places. Around these, there is a heightened amount of UFO encrypted sightings, paranormal sightings. And people have begun to speculate that they're actually opening up portals and allowing things to come into our realm that otherwise would have been restricted in some way. And it just makes me think about, all of these stories, even in Peru, where it's like they believe that their megalithic structures were actually created by a race of giants. And these giants were actually assholes. They were cannibals. They would eat the people. And that their overarching god sent floodwaters to kill these giants. And of course, this mirrors the biblical stories of the Nephilim, and the flood of Noah. And so that is a whole nother line of speculation. What happens to these spirits of these entities, these disembodied spirits? Do they ascend? Do they go someplace, or are they trapped here in this realm? And are we inadvertently? And I know I'm making a series of leaps here, but this is what I do. Are we, through technological means, opening up portals, allowing things back into our realm that should not be here? Um, And are we getting to the point with technology that we can alter our own DNA? And I don't know what that does. There's a lot of speculation there that could be totally negative. And even on top of it, with this Mandela effect and CERN kind of fucking up the timeline, is this all? And I'm so happy, Reptile, you're sticking with me on this one. Is this all a giant push by some, you know, some exterior force in the background that's been there since the beginning of time to get us to the point where we can really destabilize this realm? We can really bring in entities from other realms. We can really alter our DNA in a way that is very damning to, the human spirit, the soul. Um, and has this been sort of the mission all along? Does any of that psycho fucking schizophrenic shit resonate with you at all?
100%, Raven. I'm right along. Can you believe anyone listening to this thinking how crazy and twisted we are? But I know exactly what you're saying. That is the big conspiracy. There is there's these beings outside of our frequency of light. We can't see them. You can call them demons, archons, transdimensional entities, reptilian entities in the lower fourth astral realm. Doesn't matter. This brave new world transhumanism, I'm totally on the same page as you, mate. Why are they doing this? As I said before, what's all this technology really about, including the thing that you can't talk about on YouTube that's destroyed so many lives that people should know about as well? Is this allowing access for these beings to come in and potentially take hold and manipulate and even, I hate to say it, possess human beings? Because they come from the lower astral realm and their whole existence is based on us. You can call it loosh. They feed off the negative emotions, the hate, the pain, the anxiety. That's what the ancient stories tell us. Every religion tells the same damn story. And you look at CERN, it's very concerning, pardon the bad joke, but it really is. What's the big picture for all of this? Why 5G? Why the spraying? Why the CERN? We are in these times that are unprecedented, and it may already be too late for so many people as well. I totally agree, and I'm sure you've researched Steve Quayle, who speaks about this stuff. Shout out to guys like Steve Quayle, so many of the real researchers who go so far back. That's what I believe is happening right now. It's an agenda
I'm actually
from
I'm not familiar with Steve Quill. Would you mind filling me in a little bit?
I mean, he talks about all this stuff too. He says that CERNs are opening up portals and gates that eventually, giants and all sorts of entities are going to come out and take over this whole planet, which it does talk about in the Bible as well. And just going
Right,
back
in
to
the
the
days of
Nephilim,
Noah.
exactly. Just going back to the Nephilim that I know you like to talk about as well. It's only mentioned 2 times in the Bible. Genesis, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward. When the sons of God came into the daughters of man and they bore children to them, these were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown, the hybrids, the beings who can trace their lineage back. And also in Numbers 13:33, we saw the Nephilim there. We seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we look the same to them. That's what's going on, man. I believe it could be like a Hollywood script, especially when you're looking at CERN and some of this other stuff. The whole reason for all these rituals that they do, including the thing that you can't talk about on YouTube, which is absolutely just disgraceful. What's the big picture for that? I believe it's to allow these entities to occupy the bodies of people on Earth. I know that sounds crazy. That's the big picture. That's what I believe anyway.
Yeah, there's a lot of fear with that. With the I guess we can call it the inoculation. I don't think we're going to have any problems with that. The inoculation that rolled out over these past few years, amongst other
And just
issues.
really quickly, by the way, in case people, you have to know at the end of the day, there are these people, these so-called elites, who are totally signed on to depopulation. That's all they talk about. That's all they write about. Can't you see what's actually happening right now? If you're listening to me right now, don't allow anything in your body, ladies and gentlemen. Be very careful when you see those huge towers around. Watch what you eat. Even watch what you think. There is a depopulation agenda that's actually ongoing, and they're going to do it. They will do it. Sorry, Raven.
Are you familiar with Drew Tang?
No, mate. No.
Drew Tang, Reborn. on on Twitter or X. I'll send you his profile. He does an excellent job of laying out, because you're talking about depopulation, and it's like, who are two of the loudest voices when it comes to claiming we have a population issue, an overpopulation issue? I would argue that the two loudest voices are Bill Gates, and probably Klaus Schwab, right, of the World Economic Forum. These are two influential, powerful men who are movers and shakers on the world stage, who are adamant that we have an overpopulation issue. And then you probably have heard this one, but I think it's good for the audience. So Elon Musk has positioned himself in opposition to them. He thinks that we don't have a overpopulation issue, but we actually have such low birth rates that we're running the risk of total destabilization, and that it's very dangerous, and that we need to have more children. And so, in that way, and he's also kind of like insulted them, I believe, uh, multiple times in public, and he like trolls on Bill Gates with his profile on X. So he is in opposition to the depopulation agenda. Now, there's a really interesting parallel between. This is really fun. I've been on a sort of a rampage with this, and this is not my information. I did not discover this. It was brought to my attention by Drew Tang Reborn, and I highly recommend people go check him out. If you just type in DRUU on Twitter, I believe he'll pop up pretty readily.
I do know. Yeah, I do know Drew. Sorry, DR. Yeah. I follow him.
Yeah, he is awesome. So this is the information that he imparted on me, and I've just been ringing the bell about it, and I try to put everybody back towards him because he did the work for it, and he's a great guy. So Elon Musk and the Iron Man connection, and feel free to vocalize whether or not you've heard this, but basically, in the spirit of predictive programming or revelation of the method, as Hollywood often does, Iron Man is a predictive program movie, as well as the Avengers movies, for Elon Musk. And I'm going to try to make this quick. So basically, there are interviews where Robert Downey Jr. says that he modeled Tony Stark after Elon Musk, his mannerisms and all of these different things, which I really can't see it, but that's what he said. So that's number one. Number two, in Iron Man 2, Tony goes to show off the armor at the Stark Expo Center, and he lands on the stage in superhero fashion, and behind him are the words Stark Expo, really big. But the biggest letter is X, right? It's larger, it's highlighted a different color, and so we've got the connection from the Expo Center and Twitter turning into X. Okay, so the very first person that Tony talks to when he steps off stage is Elon Musk, who's made a cameo in the film. And so, right, that's number three. We have the Tony fighting against the depopulation agenda in the form of Thanos. Thanos is going to snap his fingers, and he's going to have the population of the universe, right? Elon Musk is in opposition to Bill Gates and the guy from the WWE, or the WWE. What's his name? Klaus Schwab. So, boom, there's another strange parallel. What are we up to, number 4? Okay, now, Tony in Age of Ultron says that he wants to create a suit of armor around the world. And by doing that, he creates Ultron. When he says that, the way he depicts a suit of armor around the world is a series of satellites in a web around the planet, much like Starlink, right? So that's number 5. Starlink is literally a series of satellites positioned around the planet, creating a web. He then creates Ultron, which is an artificial intelligence that has sort of his personality as a base. And Elon is just rolling out, what is it, Grok? I keep fucking this up. I believe it's Grok.
Yeah.
Is the artificial intelligence that Elon is rolling out. And I do believe that its base operating system is like a personality that mirrors Elon Musk's. So, like, what the fuck? is going on there? Like that is in the game of conspiracy theories, I think it's a rule of thumb for us who are trying to figure out what's up and down. If too many coincidences pile up in one spot, it's no longer a coincidence. I have a hard time. Have you ever heard that, Reptile?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so obvious. Predictive programming. Albert Pike said, when the world needs a hero, we will provide it. Elon Musk, you think you can get up there and create electric cars and SpaceX and go and buy X? That's not how it works in the Illuminati game. Really? Go look at who his parents were. And I love X, and there's aspects of Elon that I like, but at the end of the day, it's the biggest fraud I've ever seen. And again, you see Ike and other people really writing about it. This fucking guy who's going to put Neuralink inside of our heads. Can't you see what's happening? He is not your savior. Let me tell you, are you ever looking for a savior? That's what they want. Elon's not coming to save you. Q's not coming to save you. Raven's not coming to save you. But I'm coming to save you, ladies and gentlemen. Trust the Reptile Hybrid.
Thank God, finally, somebody to look towards. I'm so glad that you
And I
said that
want to
Albert
like
Pike
him too,
line.
mate. I want to like him. How good's X been? We've had a platform. I don't know where all this ends, but I know whatever this force is, they understand. They're very, very clever. The pendulum swings left to right, left to right. And I wouldn't be surprised if we go full right wing in the coming years as well. The Bible even
Oh
speaks
yeah,
about that. Enter D to the J to the T. You know what I mean?
right. One of the things that Drew Tang says is that despite the visage not matching the character, um, that essentially Trump is playing the role of like a Captain America, this like America centric kind of character. And so Avengers was just this big uh predictive programming thing, and it absolutely crushed. And when it happened, it gripped the world. Like a complete man child, I saw all of the films up until Endgame or Infinity War. And then after that, I stopped because they all just took a giant nosedive. And luckily, during that time, I was able to wake up and be like, "What the hell am I doing?" But I'm glad that you mentioned the Albert Pike thing. I have his book. I'm probably never going to read it unless we get hit with a coronal mass ejection and the power grid goes down. Then I'll have all 800 pages of morals and dogma by Albert Pike to read. But he is quoted, I believe, in that book as saying, yeah, when the people need a hero, we shall provide one to them. And so whenever people are cheering for, oh, and quick sidebar, Neuralink, I suspect Elon already has it implanted. And to me, that once again mirrors the very same thing that Tony Stark does, where he is his own guinea pig for the arc thing that he puts in his chest. And I'm sure you can go on and on about the similarities,
That's
but
very, very interesting. That's very interesting. See what they're doing now? All the reason for these satellites that are apparently being put up. There will come a time, listen to me carefully, where we won't be able to think like we are now. The mind control's so entrenched, you have no idea how advanced the technology is. It's a race against time. There will come a time, if we don't somehow stop it, where we will not be able to think properly because of the mind control. That's what it's about. Sorry, mate, but that's
yeah,
such an important
no,
point.
no, you're right. And it's just one of those things that I said it before, and my brain constantly goes there. It's like, for me personally, I'm very new to being vocal in this scene. And because previously you really kind of couldn't, right? It wasn't until X where all of a sudden you could be this sort of I guess talking head in this space. There wasn't a lot of them, and you would constantly get swatted down. And I also was never too sure in my information. As I said earlier, it's like not like I have a handle on the truth. I like to show people things that should make them go, that's really the extent of what I do. Um, that being said, being able to communicate with people like yourself and all these really awesome characters in this community of people who are trying to sound the alarms and show all the strange information that they're coming across, um, it's a genuine pleasure to be able to do this and to have these conversations and to present them to an audience that these concepts might be new to them. I mean, it's a genuine pleasure. And with that, I am filled with a sense of dread because there's no way in hell this lasts. Like, I think that we're just probably getting put on we're probably getting put on a list. I mean, we're already on a list. I just don't know what they're going to do with the list when the time comes, right? Because we don't get to do this forever, and we don't get to do this consequence free. That's just my feelings on the whole thing. Hopefully, I'm wrong. Hopefully, if the internet does go down and our voices are silenced, hopefully that's just the extent of it. But I don't think so. I think this all goes to hell in a
Eh,
handbasket, and that's not to be all doom and gloom. Um, I think what people really need to take away from this is that if all of this shit is real, the flip side of the coin is real. You know, God is real, and this is not a doom and gloom story. Um, it's not going to feel great, but I think that there is real hope. And I don't like to spread this message of like, it's all fucked and it's all burning down, and what are we going to do? Because the more I see these things around me, and the more I go down this path of believing in the validity of the things that I see, the more it just solidifies my belief in that God is real, and there wouldn't be a spiritual warfare without a good side. Because that's very much what I feel like we're locked in. We're locked into spiritual warfare. And there is a good side to all this. And that's something that I think that they're taking advantage of lately is this fact that we are engaged in spiritual warfare, and they're trying to create a false paradigm of this left hand path versus right hand path. You said before, right? Like Q isn't coming to save you. I believe that all of this actors on the world stage, this Elon shit, this Donald Trump shit, QAnon, all of this feels like, and I know Escanor is a big advocate of this, and I think this is one of the areas where he's spot on, is that this is sort of a white hats versus black hats, white magic versus black magic, left hand path versus right hand path, Freemasonic play. Albert Pike and the Freemasons providing us with heroes and villains, which is why all of our media is modeled that way. We're programmed to look for heroes and villains. And I see somebody who says, upon legions, what do you mean by God? Explain that. Just my own personal experience. I believe in Christ. I've had experiences, paranormal ones, that pushed me in that direction. So I know in my mind when I say God, that's what I mean by that. And I think that there are other entities and deities that might otherwise be characterized as lowercase g gods, and these are these things that you can call reptilians or uh, Nephilim or the Fallen, you know, the Greek pantheon, all these things that I said earlier that I believe were real. But I do think that we're getting to this point where the jig is almost up and we're being given a fake play. You know, like I just said, Albert Pike giving us the hero, and the villain is Donnie Darkened. Are you familiar with him?
Absolutely, he's great.
So Donnie, I think he
I,
does
I'm
a great
similar to
job
I'm
of.
similar to you as well with that. I don't agree with everything he says, but wow, talk about compelling research. Definitely worth a listen. And Drew, who you spoke about before, I do know the guy. You're so right, mate. And you know, I'll even say this: I'm open to anything because I don't know. I, people talk about Elon being a clone, and even if there are some sort of a white hats, nobody's perfect. As I've said before, unless you're into the satanic rituals, unless you're real deep state Illuminati, then they can work through you. So we just don't know. We don't know, but we're best off to be skeptical. We really are, especially when it comes to Elon or to Trump.
Yeah, I think it's the biggest takeaway from that is not to latch on to we've been saying it the whole time, right? It's like I'm not going to come and save you. Donald's not going to come and save you. Elon's not going to come and save you. Don't latch on to a person and think that they're the answer and the way. It's not going to work out well. And I can tell you that from experience because um being in this as long as I have, I fell for a lot of things, which who knows, they might still come to pass, but it's like I thought Anonymous was going to come and save the day back in the day. I thought that the Galactic Federation of Light, who I don't even know if they're still operating, but back in the day they used to release these YouTube videos where they would say in a very Siri kind of voice. I can't even say that. My phone's going to go off. They would say, "Dear ones, we see the struggles that you're going through, and we want you to know that we empathize with you. Right now, federations of beings are coming together to decide on how to free you from your evil oppressors." Like, that was the shit they used to say on
The
YouTube.
Galactic
Uh,
Federation is coming to save you from the reptilians. Rest assured,
oh,
sit back and do absolutely nothing and trust the plan.
unbelievable. How long have we been told to trust the plan? By
Crazy,
all these
bro.
different it's
And
it's
what's
it's the
happening now?
same thing.
What the best thing about X is so many people have been speaking up right now. I spoke before about this thing that we're not allowed to talk about. You know my story, mate. And there comes a time where you have to speak up. You just have to speak up. So it was the best of times. It was the worst of the times. We don't know about characters like Elon or Trump, but it's very, very interesting, including the latest thing that he said with, go F yourself and the rest of it. It's so transparent. It's so obvious if you can really see what's happening. But people can't see it. They love him. They love Elon. Go look at his parents. Go look what's really going on. Go look at who he really is. His business, his businesses, people who worked with him. Doesn't matter, mate. They just love him.
Have you ever seen that video of his alleged maid or nanny from when he was a
Yeah,
child?
yeah, yeah. Definitely.
So for folks who don't know, it's this like interview, not an official one, with his maid or nanny, and she's saying something to the effect of like how strange it was to be around Elon when he was growing up. And I believe she even slipped something in there about having seen a portal open up in his bedroom. Um, And whatever the case may be, she was so shaken by the abnormalities surrounding young Elon Musk that she was compelled to have a conversation with his mother about it. And one thing leads to another. Somehow the question is prompted as to whether or not Elon is the beast or the antichrist. And and I believe she said it was his mother who said, no, he's not, but he will bring about the mark. Like,
Wow.
what the fuck is that? And now here we are on the cusp of um Neuralink being rolled out, and it's like, are we within our lifetime going to see this mark, this implant that keeps you from buying or selling goods unless you have it? Um it seems like more of a reality. I remember when I was younger, it was like, remember the first few people that got the RFID chip put in their hands? That was like YouTube 2009, 2008 maybe, or something like that. And I remember they were saying like, "Oh yeah, you're going to be able to buy and sell things without having to bring a wallet around." And that really became kind of obsolete and quiet. It just never got rolled out. I can really see people taking Neuralink on.
You wait. You'll see people getting up and walking out of wheelchairs. You'll see people that weren't able to speak, who had all these cognitive problems, coming to life again. We haven't seen anything yet, Raven. You'll see miracles happen through technology. And who will be the
Yeah,
people there that will still be skeptical and say, I'm not going to do that? Very few. And eventually, unless you've been upgraded in the transhumanist society, you won't be able to go for the jobs because you haven't had the upgrade. You don't have the IQ. Remember the Matrix? They could just upload skills and stuff like that. That's coming. We're entering the brave new world. It's crazy.
that's going to be a hard thing for people to resist. This idea that like when people first get it, there's going to be a line of hyper elite people. The ones who don't resist it, who are at the front of the lines to get this, um, they're going to be leaps and bounds above people. They're going to outwork everybody. They're going to quickly become the new ruling class, and that's going to be really compelling to people. And I think they're going to, like you said, seeing people get up and walk who were previously wheelchair bound. They're going to do that to our like beloved movie stars, Michael J. Fox of the very popular Back to the Future, who has, I think it's like Parkinson's or something like that. Uh, the idea that they could roll him out onto the world stage and fix him, and all of a sudden, like, that's an entire generation of people who loved those films, who really idolized that man. who are going to be sold. I would say almost entirely right off the bat. And then, keep going down the line. All your favorite people, everybody who you loved, who made your childhood special, they're degrading, and we're going to fix them. And then not only that, but we're going to fix you too. And I think that I've been talking about this. It's weird how uh, the culture right now is aimed at creating adult adolescence, right? Even me, I kind of feel fucking stupid. I'm wearing this like tie dye shirt. I just went hard in the paint on another episode about graphic tees and just seeing adults dress like children. Adults don't dress like adults anymore. You can find no shortage of things like that from pages like Culture Critic on X, and more, you know, it was only a couple years ago I found myself in theater watching Avengers and all this other shit. Uh, they make video games, they remake video games. There's no shortage of Super Mario games. I grew up with Super Mario. They're just going to keep making them. I can keep playing them if I want. Um, there's a real effort to keep us like children, to keep us from like gracefully entering the new seasons of our lives. And I think that that's by design as well, because I think if you cannot age gracefully and you can't go into these next stages of your life and become, a respectable adult and then a parental figure and then, a grandparent one day, and you can't embody that image and become that subsect of society, uh, then you're certainly not going to meet death gracefully. And I think that I forgot who said it, that our generation was going to be either the last to die or the first to live forever. If you engineer us to be perpetual children and then you give us towards the end of our days this shiny thing that's going to make death just a bad dream, we're going to clamor for it. We're going to scramble for it. And I just see those two correlations. I'm like, we're right on the cusp of the technology that can do it, and we're also big kids, tall children. That's it. And I think that that is done by design.
You look at the big billionaires, you've got all the money in the world. The only problem they have is that they're going to die. Immortality is just around the corner, or at the very least, life extension to hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's the big thing that's the carrot and the stick that Satan or whatever that is, Raven, can dangle in front of us. Remember the movie Star Wars with Anakin Skywalker? The final thing that made him turn into Darth Vader was when Palpatine told him that he could save Padme. Remember that? That he knew she was going to die. And he said, I can make her live. That's what actually guides so many of these dark individuals, the promise of eternal life. You can talk about Ray Kurzweil. Imagine getting sucked into a computer. True spiritual people, if an alien came down and said, come with me, you'd say, it's all good. No worries at all. That's what it's about. Don't fall for it, because when it happens, everyone's going to fall for it, Raven. Everyone.
I was just talking to my son about it, and I was saying, I forget why it came up. We were in the car right before this, actually, and I was telling him that, he's saying, Dad, why is it bad to live forever? Why would that be a bad thing? However, we came on that topic. And I said, it's because I think that this realm isn't someplace we're meant to stay forever. This is someplace where we're meant to. I'm trying to explain it to him. He's only 8 years old, and I'm saying, imagine it like a video game, right? Imagine that you are in a place where you're meant to gather experience, and it matters what you do here, and it matters how you treat people, and it matters the things that you achieve, and the things that you build, and the things that you leave behind. But you take all of that and you go someplace else with it, and that this isn't the point necessarily. It's important, but it's not the end goal, and that there is something after you pass away. And what if, out of our own fear, we subvert that and we somehow get trapped in this realm where we were never meant to stay, and we never get to go to the thing that really this was like training for, in a way, to try to put it rudimentary for a kid. Um, but I just see it as being right on the horizon. We only have 10 more minutes. I have a hard out at 9:30. Well, my time. Um, is there anything that you wanted to touch on before we start wrapping up?
Do you know if it's all right? I want to give a really quick rundown. I've done it once, or I've done it a few times, on the galactic history of how this all came about, how we ended up on Earth, and who these reptilian shapeshifters are. It's crazy, Raven. I suggest most people just treat it like fiction. Can we go there? I'll do it in like 5
Let's go.
minutes. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, sit back and let Uncle Reptile tell you a story. Listen very carefully, because this is what happened. This is what the Illuminati get told. Most, if not all, of the humanoid races descend from the star system Lyra. Okay. Now, originally, they weren't physical beings. After so long, they eventually came down into physical bodies to create lots of different cultures. After living peacefully, the reptilians entered. They don't even know where they come from. Now, where we know them from is the Draco star system, also Orion later on. And eventually, this Draco Empire attacked Lyra, and it was an insane attack. So many people died, but lots of these different refugees dispersed out throughout all different places in the galaxy. We're talking Orion, Tau Ceti, the Pleiades, Procyon, Antares, Alpha Centauri, Arcturus, different galaxies like Andromeda, Sirius, Zeta Reticuli. You've heard all these names. Now, picture it. The reptilians attacked Lyra, and all of these different humanoid beings, who by that time looked a little bit different, but they're still very similar, dispersed throughout the galaxy. And two colonies, one was on Mars and one was on a planet called Maldek, which was between Mars and Jupiter at that time. Before that, it was Mars, Mercury, Earth. Sorry, it was the Sun, Mercury, Earth, Mars, Maldek, Jupiter, etc., etc. Anyway, they were there living, the Martians on Mars and the Maldekians on this planet called Maldek. Now, they didn't get along well, and they didn't want to really be part of the what we'll call the Galactic Federation. The reptilians eventually shot an ice comet in to attack these two colonies. It missed its trajectory, destroyed Maldek, creating the asteroid belt that we know today. It came back towards the sun, ripped the atmosphere off Mars, came past our planet Earth, which at that time was a water world, no discernible landmass on there. Ripped off so much of the water as well, and polarized the cap, settling between Mercury and Earth to become Venus. Now I'm flying through this. They eventually drove in their planetoid object called the Moon. It's the only object in our solar system that doesn't spin on its axis, and it's like an artificial satellite. It's a spacecraft that monitors it. The reptilians colonized Earth after that time, because once this ice comet, which is now Venus, came past Earth, it again brought up all this landmass that was never there before, making it inhabitable for beings who are, terrestrial. The reptilians lived on this planet for millennia. They are the original inhabitants of this planet. So you think they're the bad guys? Imagine it from their perspective, okay? Now it gets a little bit complex. I'm going to race through it. The different colonies that were all over the galaxy, one of them who didn't play ball was a group from Pleiades. There's lots of different groups from Pleiades. They were called the Atlans. They were like a renegade group. They have the same spirit. This is where we get our spirit for nonconformity. We don't want to play that ball. So they eventually got cast down onto this planet to take care of the reptilians, to make them busy. And so, just before I do that, Lemuria, when the reptilians came down here, we're talking the Pacific Basin, or what is now the Pacific Basin, going from Japan, my country, Australia, all the way even to the coast of California to Peru. Now, the first humanoid species that came here were the Atlans, the Pleiadian Atlans, and later the Martians came and the Maldekians. But the Atlans, which became Atlantis, that continent was the Caribbean Basin, the Azores, Canary Islands, even going up to the east coast of the United States. Okay, that's what eventually happened, and the fights ensued big time. They can't get along well with each other. And so what really destroyed Lemuria, also known as Mu, was these groups, these fights between the humanoids and the reptilians using electromagnetic weaponry, etc., etc. Eventually sunk Lemuria. Atlantis eventually fell due to their own stupidity, which is happening to this day. But the reptilians got driven underground, which is where we hear all the stories about hell being underground with the demons, all that stuff. So the reptilians pretty much lost. The humans conquered. The group from Mars came, and the Meldekians, which inhabited the Gobi Desert, northern India, Suma, and other parts of Asia. Now, this is what's really important. So you could imagine these reptilians driven underground. The humanoids have taken over everywhere. They pretty much lost, and they developed this very insidious, brilliant plan to take over the surface again. How? To create a hybrid, to kidnap some of the top leaders and to create a 50-50 hybrid. Now, this is genetic technology. It took them a hell of a long time, and even they couldn't pull it off. They got help from a group from Sirius A. And eventually they created this hybrid being that could open up the DNA codes from human to reptilian, what we call the shapeshift, which is actually not really what we're thinking, but it still is a physical shapeshift, although the world's not physical. And it was the clever guys from Sirius A who discovered that you need to ingest human hormones, blood, all that stuff to maintain the human form. That's what it's all about. That's at the highest levels what the blood rituals are about. And they didn't have a ready supply of humans at that point. So they got a wild boar out of the wild, hybridized it with a human to create the pink-skinned domesticated pig. And these reptilian hybrids were dining on swine daily to maintain their human form before they could take over the surface, get in all the positions of power, and have a ready supply of sacrifices. And this is why you can graft the skin of a pig onto us, heart valves onto us, why they're so intelligent, and also why the religion said, do not eat pig, because it's a form of humanity. Eating pigs is actually a form of cannibalism. And so these created these reptilians, along with the help from these groups, from Sirius A, created these hybrid shape-shifting reptilians, a true genetic marvel. Not some beings that are, from a different dimension or anything like that, just as real as you and I are. They are not alien. They were born here on this planet. And that's why they have to very carefully make sure that they interbreed with each other to keep that shape-shifting ability, to keep the compatibility of the reptilian hybrid. And still to this day, as David I called it, the biggest secret, the royal families, the leaders, go look at how many presidents are related to each other. What this is all about is to keep that genetic structure, to keep the 50-50 reptile hybrid bloodline alive. And still to this day, what it's all about, what the true satanic rituals are about at the highest levels, is to still ingest the blood and the hormones of the victims to maintain their human form. Now, at the conspiracy level, that's one of the biggest conspiracies ever. Our leaders, it's not just them, but our leaders, people in key positions, they're actually not human. They're a 50-50 hybrid shape-shifting reptilian. And that's just the reality that we're in. And even those guys are now in a lot of trouble as well, because certain factions are coming back and they didn't sign on to any of this stuff. They've been controlling things covertly. The new group want to control things overtly. And so it's a hell of a predicament, and it reads like a Hollywood blockbuster, Raven, but that's what we're dealing with.
Dude, that was absolutely fucking awesome. I as long as I've been in this, I've never heard anybody wrap it up, especially in a fucking in a speed session of 5 minutes. And that was, I mean, professional to say the least. That was fantastic, dude. I can guarantee you, this will be the first clip that I make because it's all the way at the end of the episode, and I want people to hear that. That was tremendous. And there's so many things that I'm gonna have to sift through. I have to listen to that back again and again to go down a bunch of different little rabbit holes there. But that was
And
incredible.
just ultimately too, when we're just really quickly, when we're talking about Satan and stuff like that, Satan is a reptilian. His whole group of reptilians. He can transform, shapeshift into a beautiful man, a reptilian. That's what we're all talking about right now. It's the same old story that's been written about all those years ago. Welcome to the New World Order.
Amazing. Please, Reptile, tell everybody where they can find you one more time.
At reptile_hybrid, bro. Come check me out on X, jump into a space. But Raven, thanks so much for having me, bro. I was a little bit upset today because I lost a mentor of mine just yesterday. He was 100 years old, and I've been really, really sad. Dr. Henry Kissinger, mate.
Oh.
Great guy.
Oh my God. Yeah. Rest in peace, Mr. Kissinger. Thank you so much, dude, for giving me your time. I'm glad that we were finally able to do this, and it didn't disappoint in the slightest. You're a great conversationalist and a bit of a professional, and this was a genuine pleasure. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed the show. Um, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Um, you can go and find us on Spotify and YouTube, Apple Podcasts. If you like the show, leave a review, a rating, and share it with your friends. Um, Reptile, thank you for your time, brother, and to the chat, thank you guys for listening, and have a good night.